BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DEHAN, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DEHAN. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. And I think the biggest piece of news on this channel is that the Zodiac Killer debunking series has returned on the weekends. So please feel free to check out any of those videos. You can always like and subscribe to the channel. There is a playlist that has been assembled where I talk about Zodiac Killer suspects whom I think absolutely were not the Zodiac Killer, or perhaps there was a very, very low chance of them having any involvement in this case. And recently I did an episode on Ed Edwards, and I will be responding to some of your comments and questions that came in on that one during this episode here. But I also want to drop the announcement that this episode is being recorded in the month of March, and I will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day on this channel. Please look out for a special March 17th episode talking just to you guys. I mean, just about the celebration. Why not? Not even going to focus too much on the true crime stuff, but that will definitely tie in because everything in life is interlocking. And when I was doing the Tuesday segments on this channel, I did something called True Crime Talk Radio. And just to show you how that would work is looking at the different true crime cases and finding out, is there any similarity in terms of psychology, or maybe the manner in which someone would go about committing a crime, or are there just any connections at all that we can explore to have a greater understanding of humanity? Because with the Zodiac Killer, you have someone who operated in 1968 and 69, who committed 5 murders, attempted other murders but was unsuccessful, and wrote in these letters and the ciphers and making phone calls and writing the message on the car door at Lake Berryessa. You have not only a serial killer but a taunting serial killer. And I've been watching a lot of true crime programs recently, and things like Forensic Files, and there was Vengeance Killer Newlyweds that was coming out on HLN. And I can't wait for the next season of Meet, Marry, Murder if Tubi decides to renew that show for another season, the one that was hosted by Michelle Trachtenberg. But I definitely have found some true crime cases where people got caught and they didn't even create a very good escape plan, or the manner in which they tried to commit a crime without getting caught was rather pathetic. And some of these examples would be perhaps Kristen Rossum, who was the subject of the American Beauty murder. She was a toxicologist who poisoned her husband and put some flower petals around to recreate the cover of the movie American Beauty. I think that was heavily blown out of proportion by the media. When you actually read some of the descriptions, it just simply says that there were some red rose petals there. It wasn't anything overly dramatic like some of the recreations. But she's a toxicologist, and she poisoned her husband with materials from her own toxicology lab, and it was very easily traced back to her, and she got caught. Or how about somebody like Hemi Newman, who murdered Rusty Snyderman? He was allegedly, I repeat, allegedly having an affair with Snyderman's wife, so he rented a silver van from a rental car company and then drove to where Snyderman was, and he murdered Rusty Snyderman. Well, again, they could very easily just trace back that silver van to the rental car company and who was in possession of that. They have things like traffic cameras, or how about eyewitnesses, or I mean, that's just a plan that's doomed to fail from the beginning. Who's in possession of the van? Oh, it was Hemi Newman, and he was indeed found guilty of that crime. But perhaps the absolute biggest example of someone who committed a murder and wanted to get caught, or had that as an underlying structure in their thinking, was Gypsy Rose Blanchard, perhaps sometimes pronounced Blanchard, but she, of course, was behind the murder of her own mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. The murder was not committed by Gypsy Rose. It was committed by an individual named Nick Godejohn, who was Gypsy's boyfriend at the time, and they orchestrated this thing together. Gypsy was mostly the brains behind the operation, and it was carried out by Nick Godejohn, and he was given life without the possibility of parole. But that's because, I'm sure you have some familiarity with that case. It was very widely discussed. Dee Dee Blanchard was forcing Gypsy Rose to live as someone who had some very severe disabilities so she could obtain money in certain ways. She was acting like the cash cow for her mother, and her mother was falsifying records showing that her daughter had cancer and muscular dystrophy, when all reality it was just faked and staged, and she even got doctors to go along with it. It was a con job, but it also involved abusing her daughter in some very serious ways, not to mention the psychological aspects and the controlling aspect. But out of those three people that I've just said, whether it's Kristen Rossum or Hemi Newman or Gypsy Rose Blanchard, I've noticed this, and I've never heard it from anywhere else, that it's almost as if somebody was living a very miserable life and they wanted to get arrested. They wanted just somebody to take them out of it. And I don't think that was a conscious motivation for any of them. But you have to wonder about how easily these people were caught. I mean, the toxicologist who's using poisons, for lack of a better term, from her own laboratory, or the guy who is very obviously going to get caught committing a murder in a rental van. I just thought that these people seem to have had some type of problem in their life that they didn't want to confront head on. So they did something very destructive because they wanted to be in prison, because it just gets them out of the hellhole that they're living in, and then they go into living in another hellhole. Absolutely bad. That's wrong. They should not have done any of these things. I mean, we're talking about murders here. But with the Zodiac killer, I'm seeing something very different to provide some contrast. The Zodiac is murdering people in California in the 1960s, and he is definitely trying to genuinely avoid capture. He wants to stay away from the police. These letters are mailed in as taunts, but someone is absolutely not trying to escape their own life of misery. Instead, they want to live in the shadows. Maybe on the surface, they are trying to put on the facade of being the nicest guy in the world, and then, after nightfall, he unleashes his destructive tendencies and goes out murdering people. But that really begs the question about, why is the Zodiac killer crime spree so limited? And one person out there who thinks that the Zodiac did not only operate in 1968 and 69 is none other than John Cameron, a retired member of law enforcement who believes that the Zodiac killer was Edward Wayne Edwards, the subject of the latest debunking series episode. And I would like to give a shout out to YouTube user Dennis Rice, who says, Ed Edwards had a lot of coincidences with Zodiac lore, but you have to force it to make it line up. You know, absolutely. And at the end of the debunking episode, I said that Ed Edwards has maybe 125 or 150 reasons about why he could be the Zodiac killer, because I was listening to John Cameron on House of Mystery, and I also listened to his interview on the Opperman Report. And when you hear him talk about the case, he does have reasons why he thinks that Ed Edwards could be the Zodiac. He's talking about how Ed Edwards was a serial killer, and I don't think anybody disputes that. He was a real serial killer who targeted people at lovers' lanes, men and women, like a male and a female, alone in the car, and in one crime he forced the male out at gunpoint and told him to stand by the car. Very similar to the Lake Herman Road murders, but I mean, I don't really mean to just jump all over the map, but I'm sharing what I genuinely think. And the problem with that is, though, Ed Edwards seemed to be more of an abductor, whereas the Zodiac would fire the shots at the victims while they were in place. There were no abductions, not at Lake Herman Road with David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, not at Blue Rock Springs with Darlene Ferrin and Mike Michaud, not at Lake Berryessa with Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. And the one time the Zodiac targeted a single victim was Paul Stein, the taxi driver, the final confirmed killing. But I can comprehend that type of thought process about how there's this guy going after lovers' lanes. And some of the other points that John Cameron brings up is that Ed Edwards was someone who wanted to become the world's greatest criminal. He wanted to become a super criminal, and he would do that by not getting caught. Well, one way that you could not get caught is attribute a set of murders, let's say in a calendar year, maybe in a 12-month cycle from October of 68 to October of 69. And yes, I'm fully aware the first Zodiac crime occurred on December 20th of 1968, not October, but that's 10 months. Whether we call it a 10-month or a 12-month cycle, okay, let's just attribute that to some persona called the Zodiac. This is the Zodiac speaking, and it's going to confuse the authorities. Oh, I can follow what he's saying. The problem is that he adds in all of these additional crimes to the list of murders committed by Edward Wayne Edwards. And he said over 600 murders were committed by Ed Edwards. I'm not exaggerating. He said around 660 murders. He thinks that he averaged 10 murders a year for 66 years. And that is very abnormal for a serial killer to operate that way. He normally there is a very, very strong decline in testosterone that happens in the age range of maybe 40 to 45, and a serial killer just decides to stop killing because he is not fueled by the same sexual urge. He is not in shape as well as he was before, so he can't avoid capture if he has to run away. And his predatory instincts are telling him, if I keep doing this, I'm going to get caught. And I shouldn't say only he, because some serial killers are indeed female. But no matter what, though, it is also in line with this person who wants to taunt the police and create this type of braggadocious element where he's going to show off, I can commit crimes and not get caught. So I think some things are in line with Ed Edwards as a Zodiac suspect and other things are not in line. But the problem is that these guys like John Cameron are doing themselves absolutely no favors by just overly inflating everything, overinflating all the statistics. And something that I heard from a different radio host named Brian Davis, who hosts the Tate LaBianca radio program along with Tana Laufenberg, is it's related to John Cameron and his Ed Edwards theory, but it's because John Cameron accused Ed Edwards of the 1974 murder of Arliss Perry, who was killed inside a chapel at Stanford University, and her body was placed in a somewhat of a ceremonial manner, and there's some candles near her body, and I believe that one of them is actually lying flat on top of her, as opposed to being lit on some type of altar, but some people thought it was a ceremonial murder. And what Brian Davis said, though, was actually about a different writer named Maury Terry, saying Maury Terry accused Bill Menser of being the murderer of Arliss Perry. Bill Menser is also a Zodiac killer suspect, and he had this whole intricate thing about how it's connected to this type of underground cult, and it turned out, okay, well, it wasn't Bill Menser, it was Stephen Crawford, the security guard who actually found Arliss Perry's body. It was identified in 2018 as being the murder of Arliss Perry because of DNA, and Stephen Crawford went on to commit suicide. So what Brian Davis then said was, all right, Maury Terry was wrong about that, and if he was wrong about that major piece of his theory, what else is he wrong about? John Cameron accused Ed Edwards of committing the 1974 murder of Arliss Perry, and then I was actually checking the date on when that was uploaded on the Opperman report, and it was 2017, a year before this news about Stephen Crawford truly reached mainstream. I'm not sure exactly when people knew about the DNA, but when you read a lot of the news articles about Stephen Crawford, it's in 2018, a year after that interview went out. Well, okay, he accused Ed Edwards of committing the 1974 murder of Arliss Perry, and that was wrong. What else is he wrong about? And as of now, I absolutely have to say I don't believe that Ed Edwards was the Zodiac killer. But recently on these Zodiac Killer news reports, I've been talking about Ann Penn, who is the author behind Serial Slaughter Zodiac and Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved. What if? I always do that. It's what if Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved? And she said something very strange about the Zodiac Killer, and I mean this. It's strange that she would say this, that he was a serial killer who perhaps averaged maybe 5 or 10 murders a year. I think she said 5 because the Zodiac committed 5 murders in that 12-month cycle and never stopped killing until he was apprehended in at the end of the last decade. So again, she thinks maybe his murder count would be in the hundreds. I'm just noticing that some people are zoning in on a suspect, whether it's Edward Wayne Edwards, Joseph D'Angelo, the Zodiac Killer, maybe George Hill Hodel could fall into this, and then they just keep adding on these other possible crimes. I don't know if I want to call it cherry picking to get a desired result, or perhaps I would simply just call it they're just listing off every crime under the sun and in the darkness to a single person, when in fact a lot of these crimes are unrelated. And the final thing that I will say about John Cameron and his Ed Edwards theory is something that I talked about in the debunking series, and that was how, in addition to accusing Ed Edwards of the Zodiac murders, he also accuses him, as I said, of the murder of Arliss Perry in '74, the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, and the murder of Darlie Roudier's children. Darlie Roudier is currently on death row for the murders, plural, of her 2 sons. And I did 3 episodes about her on this channel in 2022, and I absolutely do not believe that Ed Edwards committed those crimes. What most likely happened is that someone inside the house, not Ed Edwards, took the bread knife out of Darlie Roudier's butcher block, cut the screen on the family home, then returned that same bread knife to the butcher's block, took out a different knife, and then murdered the 2 children. Then they believe Darlie Roudier inflicted injuries to herself and then blamed it on some type of home invader. But the fact that the microfibers and the fiberglass particles from the screen were found on the bread knife and the butcher's block suggested that it was someone inside the house, and also that is just another very feeble-minded way of trying to cover up the crime by putting the knife back in the butcher's block and using the bread knife. No one's going to look at that one, right? Right? Well, wrong. Darlie Roudier was indeed convicted and is now on death row. So I just think all the forensic evidence is pointing against Edward Wayne Edwards or any type of home invader. Somebody was writing in the comment section here on this channel that they thought that Tommy Lynn Sells, the cross-country killer, or also known as the coast-to-coast killer, was the person behind the murder of Darlie Roudier's children. I don't think that he did either, and that's an easier case to prove because that he wasn't, because Tommy Lynn Sells was incarcerated at the time in 1996 at the time of the Roudier murders. But it goes to show you, some people are putting out wild stories, and it also goes to show you that there are indeed cross-country serial killers who commit a few murders here, who commit a few murders there. Steve Hodel has talked about this a lot with his Zodiac killer suspect, George Hill Hodel, and he says that the way that his father, George Hodel, was able to avoid capture was by committing crimes in this area and that area, like Los Angeles and the Philippines and Hawaii too, I think, and then in California in the Bay Area committing murders and blaming them on the Zodiac killer, a very similar theory that John Cameron has created. And with Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, it is a little bit different because you don't have this taunting element. Yes, he is accused of being the Zodiac killer by Ann Penn, but you don't see someone who is truly trying to avoid the police by moving to different places. Instead, he was just very stealthy, and he didn't leave a lot of evidence behind at the time, but he did not foresee DNA coming into the picture, so then he was able to be linked to all of these crimes because of DNA, as well as other forensic evidence, advancements in forensic technology that he was not aware of at the time. I mean, how could he be? But I'm still glad that he is incarcerated. And if anybody has any comments at all about Edward Wayne Edwards as a Zodiac killer suspect, or some of the people that I just mentioned, George Hodel, Joseph D'Angelo, or if you'd also want to talk about Bill Menser, perhaps because he's connected to the Zodiac case, and again, many crimes in California, as well as the murder of Arliss Perry, even though he almost certainly didn't do that one. Bill Menser was a convicted murderer who was involved in the shooting of June Mincher, as well as the murder of Roy Radin in 1984 and 83, respectively. But last week on the channel, I was talking about the book Zodiac Killer Dreams, which was written by Ray Grant, and it is a novel. And if you ever read this book, it's very Zodiac related, but there's lots of science fiction involved, and it talks about time travel, and I hope Ray Grant doesn't mind if I read this very small segment. This is just one page from my electronic version of the book, and it says, "The older man at the end of the coffee counter's conga line glances back in surprise, his eyes protruding above his spectacles. 'I'm sorry, Dr. Tamarian?' ? She thrusts out a hand whose fingernails are painted bright red. 'Emily,' she says her name. He stares at the hand as if he's a space alien caught off guard by the odd ways of Earthlings, and then he hesitantly shakes it once. 'How did you know who I was?' 'I Googled you. You look just like your picture on the Zodiac Killer websites.' He frowns. 'I hope you didn't read any of the nasty comments about me.' 'You mean the ones calling you a crackpot?' Her laugh is loud enough that the zombies ahead of them in line scowl, like their lumbering slumber is being disturbed. Emmy smiles. It's actually Emily, smiles apologetically at them, then winks at Ray. 'I'm sorry, I couldn't help cracking up when I saw people call you that. Do you really believe a Cal Berkeley professor is the Zodiac Killer?' 'Michael O'Hare?' 'Yes, I do.' And the reason why I wanted to read this off is I am not 100% certain, but when it says that people have been calling Ray Grant a crackpot online, was that referring to Michael Butterfield by chance of ZodiacKillerFacts.com? Now, I don't think I heard him use that exact word about Ray Grant, but he has definitely used the word crackpot to refer to other researchers, writers, and thinkers very frequently. But anyway, it's a fairly entertaining novel, Zodiac Killer Dreams, by Ray Grant. Now, if you're listening to this far-off corner of YouTube, perhaps you get other videos about the Zodiac Killer recommended to you. I certainly do. And one of them was from the Infographics channel, and it was an hour long, and I think they may have just taken some of their old Zodiac Killer videos and assembled them in an hour-long format. Like instead of their usual 10, 13, 15-minute videos, they put them all together into one. But yesterday, one of them just came up in my suggested feed, so I decided to watch it. And I thought that overall, it was all right. I mean, it's definitely very eye-catching, but there was one thing that bothered me in particular, and that was the way they chose to portray Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, the victims of the Zodiac Killer's Lake Berryessa stabbing on September 27th of 1969. In the first segment they featured Brian and Cecilia dancing in a very bizarre way, and then they turned to having a cookout, and then they get blindsided by the Zodiac Killer, and there's all this watermelon that is on a picnic table at Lake Berryessa. The next time they chose to feature Brian and Cecilia, they're wearing bathing suits, and they are sunbathing, and they're all tan and bronzed from the sun, and then again they get blindsided by the Zodiac Killer. Although I did notice at that time the Zodiac wasn't even wearing the Lake Berryessa hood, but rather they just showed the silhouette of a figure. I'm not really sure what was going on there, Now, you might be thinking, well, who cares what the infographics channel does? It's just for entertainment. And mostly, that is true, and I don't think that that video is meant to be taken seriously, or maybe it's an extreme exaggeration that is just meant to draw attention to a point that Brian Hartnell and Cecilia just went to the lakeside to have a good time, and no matter what they were doing, whether they're eating watermelon or going sunbathing on the sands of the beach, but I don't really think the beach looked like that. Anyway, it's not meant to be taken seriously. But what I was just wondering is, why is it so awkward? Why is it so cringeworthy? It's not the most evil thing in the world, but it is cringeworthy to watch them just these types of weird dancing. And more importantly, as animators, why is somebody taking the time to animate and create all of those unnecessary details? Is the true story not enough for you that you just have to make it appear silly? Okay, well, I think though that the infographics channel is definitely in the more of the entertainment category as opposed to information, sadly, maybe even ironically. But back in 2019, I was discussing this very subject on the channel because I'd heard one of Dr. Todd Grande's videos when he was talking about how YouTube videos are either entertainment or educational. They're either entertaining or they're educational. And I responded to that in an episode that I did called Your Psychotic Online Friend, which I was talking about a host of other subjects. But I wanted to address that because I said, I don't think that that is an appropriate dichotomy, because commentary should be its own separate entity. Because commentary is meant to be entertaining, right? But you have a responsibility to be accurate. Even I have a responsibility to be accurate when I'm talking about real stories and true crime, whether it's the Zodiac killer or some of these other crimes that I've mentioned, like Darlie Routier, or some of the other activities of Ed Edwards that might not be Zodiac related. You still have a responsibility to be accurate. And while the infographics show is very entertaining, it is perhaps not the most accurate channel. But if we're talking about the infographics show, there is another channel out there called Histographics. It took me a long time to remember their name. I was thinking, is it Pycnographics, Pictographics? No, it's called Histographics. And the animation is almost identical, so I don't know if this is just a secondary channel that they have where they might retouch some episodes or uploads and then they put them on another channel, or maybe it's just done by somebody who is like doing the whole imitation is the greatest form of flattery angle. But this channel, the Histographics, put out a video called The Zodiac Killer, First American Serial Killer, question mark? And it shared the absolute worst Zodiac theory that I have ever read, heard, or encountered, and that relates to the final Zodiac crime that was committed on October 11th of 1969, the murder of Paul Stine, the taxi driver. And their theory is that the Zodiac killer was wearing his Lake Berryessa costume in the back of Paul Stine's taxi, and that he shot Paul Stine and killed him, and that the reason why there was an APB that was put out for an NMA, Negro Male Adult, forgive my language, the reason why people were on the lookout for a black man is because, oh, well, the witnesses saw the Lake Berryessa hood. They saw the Zodiac's black costume, and that's black, and I guess other people in the human race are black, so that must have been what they're thinking. And you're probably like, oh, Ned, you're just making this up. You're just misrepresenting their video. There's no way anyone actually said that. Well, you can hear it in your own words.
However, soon Zodiac changed his style and shot a taxi driver, Paul Stine, to whom he got into the car with. 3 teenagers from the house across the street saw the killer covering his tracks. But because of the black mask, they mistakenly thought he was African American. Therefore, the arrived police officers did not pay attention to a suspicious...
Okay, well, I don't know why they added in that car sound there, but that indeed was their theory, that the Zodiac killer was wearing the Lake Berryessa hood in the back of Paul Stine's taxi. Never mind that it should have been at night, and that's something that is recalled very easily by people saying that the street lamps were on. And what, is Paul Stein just gonna pick up somebody wearing a Zodiac killer costume, and no one else, like, in front of the Pinecrest Diner or wherever it was, is gonna be like, hey, that man over there is wearing a Zodiac killer costume. Yeah, very inconspicuous disguise there, my friend. And as I said before, these channels aren't meant to be taken extremely seriously, and sometimes they have extreme exaggerations to draw attention to the point, but that's just not only incorrect, it's also ridiculous. They're doing themselves no favors, and I mean, as I said, that's the worst Zodiac theory that I have ever heard, hands down, but it doesn't relate to the entirety of the case. And we have a comment that came in from William Barrett Travis on that episode that was put out over the weekend about Edward Edwards Debunked, and he says, "Do you feel indeed that Kathleen Johns was picked up by the Zodiac? The Kathleen Johns incident occurred on March 22nd of 1970. She is one of the few victims that is thought to have been abducted by the Zodiac killer and actually given some credibility. Some people think that Donna Lass was abducted by the Zodiac killer, but in the crimes from 68 and 69, the victims are not abducted. But overall, I have to say no, I don't believe Kathleen Johns actually encountered the Zodiac killer. I don't believe, endorse, or accept that any of the non-canonical Zodiac crimes were actually committed by the Zodiac. And with the Kathleen Johns story, I began to doubt her more and more, and I don't want to just say that I don't believe someone who may have actually experienced a serial killer, because those things happen all the time, that someone comes forward with us with information saying, I was attacked by a serial killer, and the authorities don't believe them. But I guess you would say I am somewhat skeptical of the Kathleen Johns story, and it's never sat well with me from the beginning. Have you ever had that type of experience where you're just listening to somebody and they're telling you a story and you're like, wait a second, is that true? I can't quite put my finger on it, but is that true? I definitely believe she encountered somebody, and Howard Davis actually talked about this on the Zodiac Killer Channel's interview with the Experts series, which I'm also the host of, and he said that there was an alternative theory out there about how Kathleen Johns set her own car on fire for insurance fraud, or maybe she had some type of accomplice set it on fire while she was out running around. But Howard Davis tried to refute that by saying he'd interviewed Kathleen Johns herself, and she said that she didn't have insurance at the time. She was too poor. I don't know if she made the story up or not, but it's never sat well with me. And it's true, though. I don't believe the Zodiac killer was an abductor. I view the Zodiac as more of a cowardly serial killer who would sneak up on people and run away. And I wanted to conclude this episode by looking at some of the content that was discussed previously, the infographics show and the histographics channel, whatever that is. And there are lots of comments and questions that have been written out here about the Zodiac killer. And I know that it's not super practical to read the comments section from someone else's channel, but why not? Let's do it anyway. We have a comment from MT Gleam who says, honestly, too many people think that the Zodiac killer was a guy who was a genius. He wasn't completely dumb, but a very sloppy killer. He never got caught due to bad police work and a bit of luck. Oh, a lot of people think that that's the biggest reason why the Zodiac killer didn't get caught, just luck, because if you're someone who doesn't entertain a conspiracy involving Officer Richard Hoffman, he did a patrol of the Blue Rock Springs Park just minutes before Darlene Ferrin and Mike Michaud were shot on July 4th of 1969, and if he had been there 10 minutes later, or maybe if it's even 5 minutes later, depending on some estimations, he could have apprehended the killer. Some people think Richard Hoffman was an active participant, and I can get how they're thinking that using mental reasoning, but I don't think I've heard a single piece of or heard about a single piece of hard evidence that would tie him to anything in the Zodiac killer crimes. And we have a comment and question from Frogs Jumps, who says, couldn't the Zodiac killer have just died after 1974, or took his own life because he was awaiting the so-called slaves that he had acquired? I'm very curious. 1974, perhaps you're referring to the Exorcist letter, which was written in that year, which talks about plunging into the billowy wave in the suicide's grave, Titwillow, Titwillow, Titwillow. That's a reference to the Mikado, but some people think that that was either a genuine suicide note, that the author of that one was intending on committing suicide shortly after the reception of the Exorcist letter, or that he was also putting an end to the Zodiac killer persona. And I've thought highly of some of the other Zodiac letters that came later on, particularly the 1978 letter. And if you listen to my interview with Richard Grinnell on the Zodiac Killer interview with the Expert series on the Zodiac Killer channel, he shares a lot of his observations about how the Zodiac letters could have carried on well after that. But I don't believe that the Zodiac was going to commit suicide to await his slaves, because in the solution to the 340 cipher, which was solved about a year and a couple of months ago by David Oranchak, Jarl Van Eyck, and Sam Blake, that one talks about how I have enough slaves to work for me in paradise. So that happened back in 1969, most likely, when that one was created. In fact, we know that it had to have been created in 1969 because it has a contemporary reference saying that wasn't me on the TV show. Therefore, the Zodiac could have committed suicide in 69 if he was done then, but he didn't. He continued to write letters well after 69 and 70, all the way to 74, definitely, maybe even onward. So at that point, no, I don't believe the Zodiac actually committed suicide to await his slaves. And we had one comment that came in that I don't have in front of me right now, but I would just like to address it when somebody asked the question about, do you think that the slaves in paradise angle could be tied to Islam, that the Zodiac Killer was referencing a superficial understanding of Islam? And I am not a Muslim, and I haven't read the Quran in its entirety, but the Zodiac Killer talked about how he wanted to die and be reborn in paradise, and who he has killed will be his slaves. I have never encountered that exact idea in Islamic theology from my own readings. I believe you're referring to something like the 72 virgins that they will receive once they go to heaven, that some people believe. But like, again, I'm not a Muslim, but when I've talked to Muslims about that and heard them on TV shows, they say that that is not even a real Muslim belief. I shouldn't say anything more than that. So if you mean like a misinterpretation of Islam, perhaps, but I found it a little bit more convincing when John Cameron, of all people, the guy that I was barbecuing at the beginning of the episode, talked about how that could come from Egyptian mythology. And that's what I tried to say on the debunking episode that came out over the weekend, because I thought that that might have been an observation that was either correct or it was consistent with what the Bible Geek said on his show about how slaves in the afterlife could be from Egyptian mythology, and maybe the Zodiac Killer is trying to act like a pharaoh because he's so full of himself and he wants to be so domineering. He just wants to be above everything, wants to be the top of everything, and he's mailing in these letters and ciphers talking about how he wants to collect slaves for his afterlife. Well, that was something that was mentioned by the pharaohs. This guy wants to become a pharaoh. Okay, that one I think is a little bit more plausible. Our next comment is, the Zodiac Killer's name was Raphael Edward Cruz. He changed his name to Ted Cruz to avoid the police. He graduated from Harvard and is now a senator. I only wanted to read that comment because it was written by Ludwig von Beethoven. Alright, the whole world's coming together. The next comment is from Shiro Kitten. Wait, I thought he was caught, unless that was a different guy. I remember on the news last year they said that it was an old murderer who stood in front of the courts, and he was old. I think that that's referring to the Golden State Killer. I thought that, no, that's not the Zodiac. But, Michael says, who's watching this video after they identified him 5 months ago? Now, this is the other thing that came up in the news. You're referring to Gary Francis Post and the Case Breakers, a different Zodiac Killer suspect, and no, sorry, I don't believe that they identified anything at all. The next comment is from Bo Ring, who says, the Zodiac Killer? Oh, so he kills the Zodiac signs? The Zodiac killer that operated in California in the 1960s did not kill victims according to their Zodiac signs, but the Zodiac killer copycat Eddie Seda, who operated in New York in the 1990s, did so. And when I was listening to the first episode that I ever heard about him, it was on the Forensic Files podcast, and they said that his first 3 victims all had different Zodiac signs, and they simply think that he just got lucky, that he was trying to kill someone to commit 12 murders, one for each Zodiac sign, and then he would commit a murder, then pull out the victim's wallet and look for identification. So, but that was definitely not the Zodiac of California. And we have a comment from Joe Scholler who says, he could be in your family tree and you wouldn't even know it. Well, absolutely, though. Because no matter who the Zodiac was, no matter who committed those murders in 1969, as well as 68, and maybe some other crimes from 66 all the way to 81, somebody would have been related to the killer in some way, somehow. Even if he's an only child, he's got parents who most likely have siblings, so he's got aunts and uncles, family tree. Somebody either turned a complete blind eye to this person, or somebody was thinking that this is there's some suspicious activity going on, and maybe they were an active participant. Maybe someone's covering up for a family member. And you really have to wonder what that would be like if you were related to the Zodiac killer. Dr. Feelgood says the Zodiac was more than one person. I'd say 2. The shooter and the killer, and his friend who wrote to the papers. Arthur and Edwards, if you ask me. Now, do you mean Arthur Lee Allen and Edward Wayne Edwards? Well, what's the connection? How on earth do you know that they know each other? In fact, I don't believe that Edward Wayne Edwards and Arthur Lee Allen were friends or anything like that, or business partners. I mean, John Cameron tries to link all this stuff together by saying that Ed Edwards was a serial killer who wanted other people to be blamed for his murders, so he would set it up as luring people into some type of business scheme or telling them that they're going to receive a lot of money for going along with whatever activity is happening, and they ended up either murdered or they get murdered and then someone else gets blamed for it. So that sounds like something that Ed Edwards would do, preying on someone vulnerable like Arthur Lee Allen, but how on earth is there any documentation that Ed Edwards convinced Allen to commit the crimes? Or I don't even know if that comment is saying that Edwards was the letter writer and Allen was the murderer, or Allen wrote the letters and Edwards was the murderer. I think that that's a little bit too far out. Another comment from Neo's Revenge says, he has been identified as Gary Francis Post and he's been dead for 3 years now. No, he has not, and it's amazing how you can just put something out in the media and people will believe it, and the history books 100 years from now might say that, oh yeah, the Zodiac killer was Gary Francis Post. I sure hope that doesn't happen, because that is just media manipulation at its finest. And a question comes in from Zinx Kronos, who says, why was he called the Zodiac killer? I thought he only killed people with certain Zodiac signs or something. And again, the Zodiac copycat Eddie Seda definitely attempted to do that, but the Zodiac killer from California gave himself that name. And somebody talked about the name Code Killer in the comments section. Yes, the Zodiac was referred to as the Code Killer or the Cipher Slayer, but what they're trying to tell me was that the name Cipher Slayer actually came later on. Okay, I mean, but those names have definitely been used by the media. Playtime once sent me an article saying that the Zodiac was going to be referred to as the Laughing Killer, but my original take on the subject is something that I don't even back down from, when I simply think the Zodiac chose that word because he thought it was cool and sounded badass. And some people think that the name comes from the movie Charlie Chan at Treasure Island talking about a killer named Zodiac, or some people think that it came from the Zodiac watch. A lot of people have been trying to convince me that it came from the Ford Zodiac, but there could be. We have a comment from Gonzalo Oliveira who says, could it be possible that his puzzles are separated by prime numbers based on the number of letters that he sent? Whether that's true or not, Gonzalo, I like how you think. And Gareth Penn is a little bit retired now, the author of Time 17. I think he would absolutely love to take that idea and run with it, except it's yours, not his. And One Man Army replied to Gonzalo by saying, If he misspelled the word paradise, Paradice, he can't be too bright. I don't think he designed the puzzles himself, but borrowed the method possibly. Also, he left people alive and left witnesses on a couple of occasions. Still horrible either. I would actually dispute that with you, one-man army. I mean, I don't think that says anything about the killer's intelligence. About inconsistency, perhaps, but not intelligence. The misspellings might have a very specific meaning. They might have all been very, very specifically chosen. Some people think that they're just meant to be confusing, and they succeeded in that. But other people think that they're actually evidence that the Zodiac was educated in a certain background. But, I mean, I am not a serial killer. I want you guys to just kind of pretend that that's true. I have never killed anybody, no plan to do so. But if I were, and I were somebody to mail in these ciphers, like saying that it's going to contain my identity, absolutely I would put it in there. And I wouldn't put it in a way that you would ever figure out. You would have to be me to solve the cipher. Even if you get the code and it says, hope you're having fun trying to catch me, that wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up an interesting point about me. Alright, you're going to get the solution. But maybe like every third letter would give you some type of clue to my identity. It's not going to give you my name, but it's going to kind of maybe give you the title of my favorite book or something, and then I would donate that book to the library that says I was the Zodiac, and I'm not even going to put my name in that, but if you followed the clues long enough, then you could figure it out, but it would be nearly impossible to do so. So I don't think the misspellings show anything about the killer's intelligence. Many people believe that they were intentional. And the next comment is from C.D. Ascario, who says, if you think about it, the Zodiac was just a bitter dude who didn't have a Valentine's date. Again, not everyone believes that. Some people think that there were multiple killers, whether it's Ed Edwards and Arthur Lee Allen. That's one of the more extreme theories that I think is heavily fueled by speculation, but some people think that there was a group that was involved, even though I was reading that segment from Ray Grant's book where he talks about Michael O'Hare being the Zodiac. Ray Grant's theory involves 4 participants, 3 of them who'd have definitely helped with the planning and the disinfo campaigns. Hugh Penn, Gareth Penn, and Berta Margulies. And over the past couple of years, a lot of people have been putting this one out on the internet that it was a partnership between Don Chaney and Arthur Lee Allen. I was even curious about that for a while when I said that I did the episode Arthur Lee Allen's partner. What if he had a partner? What if it were 2 people instead of 1? Lots of people think that this is so much more than what Ray Grant called the sad little man theory. He said something like that I read off last week. But yes, that the Zodiac is just a sad, lonely man who doesn't have a Valentine's date, as I just read off there. Some people are like, that's too simple. This was a calculated effort done by multiple people that was meant to create a serial killer legend, more or less. And I would like to thank the Infographics channel, though, for creating their Zodiac Killer videos, as well as the comments that were left by people over there. And now I would like to end the episode with a comment from BlackBoxOnlineRadio, and this one was written by Jared Wicknell, who says, cool to hear you debunk Ed Edwards. The man has been accused of every other major crime you could think of during his lifetime. Just because he killed various people doesn't mean he's the Zodiac Killer. Keep up the great work, Ned. Hey, Jared, thank you so much. And it's important to remember that just because somebody else murdered other people, it does not mean that he committed this exact set of murders in 1968 or 69. Some of the more outrageous suspects out there fall into that category, and I'm a big fan of the Opperman Report hosted by Ed Opperman. As I said, that's where I was listening to John Cameron's interview, one of them. He has many online. And he really likes to zone in on the outrageous suspects. Like, if you ever listen to Ed Opperman, he'll often ask other Zodiac theorists, what do you think about Ed Edwards as a suspect? What do you think about George Hodel as a suspect? And, he's in the media, and he can ask any type of question that he wants. But I think that that is a little bit impractical. Oh, you definitely get curious about it. I get curious about those types of guys. What was really going on? Are they serial killer masterminds? Or is the story just blown out of proportion? And you always want the truth. But with the Zodiac case, I find that that's taking away a lot of attention, time, and resources from more credible suspects. So, what do you think about any of the Zodiac killer material that has been discussed in the show? If you want to respond to things about Ed Edwards or George Hotel, or some of the other suspects that were briefly talked about, such as Michael O'Hare, or if you have any comments about the infographics channel, and you want to respond to the worst Zodiac theory that I've ever heard, maybe you can share the worst Zodiac theory that you have ever heard. Put your ideas in the comments section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Instagram, BlackBoxNet88, also on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and you can even like the show's Facebook page, Black Box Online Radio. Pretty simple, and feel free to check out some of the things from Rep Sports and Raze Energy, excuse me. There's the link to that in the description box. Lots of things in the description box, so feel free to have a look. And I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.